Hello everyone, welcome to a chilling new tale titled The Hollow Hunt. This story begins in a mundane high school classroom in rural Tennessee, but spirals into a nightmarish journey through the eerie depths of the Great Smoky Mountains, where a teacher faces a sinister force disguised as a parent. Expect a blend of psychological tension and supernatural horror that will keep you on edge. Let's dive into a narrative that starts with a spark of defiance and leads to a darkness that no one could foresee. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above the cluttered classroom at Willow Creek High, a small school nestled in the rolling hills of eastern Tennessee. I adjusted my glasses, scanning the stack of essays on my desk, each one a testament to the apathy of my 11th grade English students. The clock on the wall ticked toward the end of the period, its hands moving as sluggishly as the kids slouched in their seats. I sighed, picking up the top paper, its margins scribbled with doodles of skulls and half-hearted attempts at sentences. The author's name, scrawled in messy ink, read, Jacob Carter. I didn't need to read past the first paragraph to know it was a disaster, barely coherent, with characters as flat as the paper itself, and a plot that wandered nowhere. Jacob, I called, my voice cutting through the low hum of whispers and the occasional snap of gum. The lanky boy in the back row looked up, his hoodie pulled low over his eyes, a smirk tugging at his lips. This is 11th grade English, not a creative writing free-for-all. Your story lacks structure, character depth, anything resembling effort. I held up the paper, its edges curling slightly from being crumpled in his backpack. Care to explain why you thought this would pass muster? Jacob leaned back, crossing his arms. Come on, Mr. Hayes. This is just English. Nobody cares about stories. I'm going to be fixing cars at my uncle's shop after graduation. Why do I need to write some fancy tale? His tone was sharp, defiant, and the class snickered, feeding off his bravado. I felt a familiar irritation bubble up. Teaching this group was like herding cats, lazy, disinterested cats who'd rather nap than engage. English studies was the dumping ground for kids who'd opted out of advanced English, the ones who thought showing up was effort enough. Jacob, I don't care if you're planning to be a mechanic or a rocket scientist, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the urge to snap. As long as I'm your teacher, you'll put in the work. Take this back, rewrite it, and give me something with a plot that doesn't fall apart in 2 sentences. I slid the paper across the desk, watching his smirk fade into a scowl. He muttered something under his breath, too low for me to catch, but the word, bullshit, floated just clear enough to make my jaw tighten. Oh, and Jacob, I added, leaning forward. Watch the language. You're not in your uncle's garage. The class erupted in soft laughter, and Jacob's cheeks flushed as he snatched the paper and slumped back in his seat. I glanced at the poster on the wall, my pride and joy listing the tenets of good writing. Concise, articulate, realistic, emotive, foolproof, unhacked, literate. I'd spent hours designing it, hoping it would inspire them. Clearly it was just wall art to these kids. The bell rang and the room filled with the scrape of chairs and the rustle of backpacks. Jacob lingered, his eyes darting to me, as if weighing whether to argue further. You know, he said, standing and shoving his hands in his pockets. My dad's not going to be happy if you keep riding me like this. He's coming to parent-teacher night. Might want to watch yourself, Mr. Hayes. The threat hung in the air, casual but pointed. I forced a smile, hiding the unease creeping up my spine. Jacob's father, Tom Carter, was a name whispered among the faculty, a volatile man, a hunter with a temper as unpredictable as a storm in the Smokies. Is that so? I replied, keeping my tone light. I look forward to discussing your progress with him. Maybe he'll appreciate my efforts to get you to write something worth reading. Jacob's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, turning and sauntering out with a swagger that screamed he'd won some imaginary battle. I shook my head, gathering my papers. Teaching here was my first gig after college, and I'd hoped to inspire, to mold young minds. Instead, I was stuck with a class of kids who saw English as a pointless hurdle and parents who might just be worse. As the room emptied, I sat back staring at the poster. Emotive. Make the reader care. If only I could get through to them. Tonight's parent-teacher conferences loomed, and I held a sliver of hope that meeting the parents might shed light on why these kids were so disengaged. But Jacob's warning about his father echoed in my mind, a faint chill settling in my chest. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just a kid's empty threat. After all, I'd handled worse, or so I thought. The evening air in Willow Creek was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, the kind of crispness that clung to your jacket as you stepped outside. I locked the classroom door behind me, my briefcase heavy with ungraded essays and a thermos of cold coffee. The school's gymnasium, repurposed for parent-teacher night, glowed under harsh fluorescent lights, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I adjusted my tie, steeling myself for a long night of forced smiles and carefully worded critiques. Most parents would be pleasant enough, I figured, but Jacob's parting shot about his father, Tom Carter, gnawed at me. The man's reputation preceded him. Stories of bar fights, a temper that could flare like a struck match, and a knack for making people regret crossing him. I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. Inside the gym buzzed with low chatter, the hum of parents navigating tables lined with name tags and schedules. I found my spot near the back, a folding table with a stack of progress reports and a lukewarm pitcher of water. The first few meetings went smoothly. Mrs. Larson, whose daughter Emily was shy but diligent. Mr. Patel, who nodded enthusiastically as I praised his son's knack for poetry. Each conversation chipped away at my earlier frustration, replacing it with a cautious optimism. Maybe I could make a difference here, even with the tough crowd I'd been assigned. As the night wore on, the crowd thinned, and my watch ticked past 8:30 p.m. I was packing up, ready to call it a day, when a last-minute email pinged on my phone, a late booking for a meeting with Tom Carter. My stomach twisted. I'd hoped to avoid this, to slip out before facing the man who'd become a specter in faculty lounge gossip. But there was no dodging it now. I straightened my notes, rehearsing what I'd say about Jacob's lackluster performance without sounding accusatory. The gym doors creaked open, and a figure stepped in, his boots thudding against the polished floor. Tom Carter was not what I expected. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a flannel shirt tucked neatly into faded jeans, the kind of rugged look you'd see on a guy who spent his days splitting wood or hauling game. His hair was dark, slicked back, and a beard framed a face that was weathered, but not unkind. His eyes, though, were sharp, like they could cut through you and see what you were hiding. He extended a hand, his grip firm, but not crushing. "Evening, Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice warm, almost disarming. "Tom Carter. Sorry for the late slot work kept me." I shook his hand, caught off guard by his friendliness. "No trouble at all," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Glad you could make it." We sat, and I launched into my spiel about Jacob, his potential, his lack of effort, the half-baked story he'd turned in. Tom listened, nodding, his expression softening into something like regret. "Kid's been tough since his mom left us," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "She passed a few years back. Cancer. I'm out at the lumber mill most days, so Jacob's on his own a lot. Guess he's acting out." I nodded, feeling a pang of sympathy. "I understand, but he's got talent buried under all that attitude. If we can get him to focus, he could really shine." Tom smiled, a genuine one that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Appreciate you trying, Mr. Hayes. Most teachers gave up on him already." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, his work, the town's annual fair. He mentioned hunting, his passion, and his eyes lit up. "You ever go out in the Smokies? Plenty of deer up there, even bear if you're lucky." I admitted I hadn't hunted since moving to Tennessee, though I'd grown up tracking game with my dad in Kentucky. "Hard to find good spots around here without knowing the land," I said. Tom leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Well, you know me now. I've got a spot just outside Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Private land, no hassle. How about you join me this weekend Saturday night? Be good to have company. The offer caught me off guard. Fraternizing with a student's parent felt like crossing a line, but Tom's easy demeanor made it hard to say no. Besides, I'd been in Willow Creek for months and hadn't made a single friend outside the school. I don't know. I hedged, rubbing my chin. Work's been piling up. Come on, man. Tom pressed, his grin infectious. Teaching's stressful. You need to blow off steam. One night, a few beers, maybe bag a buck. What's the harm? His enthusiasm was hard to resist, and against my better judgment, I found myself nodding. All right, Saturday it is. Where do we meet? Entrance to the park off the old logging road, he said. 7 p.m. Bring a rifle if you got one. I'll handle the rest. We shook hands again, and he left with a wave, his boots echoing as he crossed the gym. I sat there staring at my notes, a strange mix of excitement and unease settling in my gut. The Great Smoky Mountains were beautiful, but they had a reputation. Hikers went missing. Old ghost stories lingered. I shook it off, chalking it up to nerves. Tom seemed like a good guy, rough around the edges but genuine. I'd been wrong about him, hadn't I? The rest of the week crawled by, each day a repeat of the last Jacob Smirk's half-finished assignments and the faint hum of the classroom lights that seemed to mock my efforts. By Friday, I was drained, the weight of teaching a class that didn't care pressing down on me. I caught myself staring out the window during lunch, watching the distant peaks of the Great Smoky Mountains, their ridges cloaked in a haze that felt both inviting and ominous. Tom's offer lingered in my mind, a chance to escape the monotony, even if just for a night. I hadn't hunted in years, but the idea of it stirred something primal, a memory of crisp mornings and the weight of a rifle in my hands. Saturday morning, I pulled my old Winchester from the closet, its wood stock scratched from years of use. I spent the afternoon cleaning it, the smell of gun oil sharp and familiar. My apartment, a cramped rental on the edge of town, felt smaller as I worked the walls closing in with the anticipation of the evening. I checked the scope, loaded a box of 30-06 rounds, and packed a thermos of coffee. By 6, I was in my truck, the engine rumbling as I headed toward the park. The radio played a staticky country tune, but I barely heard it. My thoughts tangled in what lay ahead. Tom's friendliness had disarmed me, but Jacob's warning about his father's temper kept resurfacing, a nagging whisper I couldn't shake. The sun was dipping below the horizon when I reached the logging road, a narrow dirt path branching off the main highway. I pulled over my headlights, cutting through the gathering dusk. The sign for Great Smoky Mountains National Park loomed ahead, its faded letters barely legible in the twilight. A smaller sign below it read, "Stay on marked trails." I snorted softly. Hunting in a national park was illegal, but Tom had assured me we'd be on private land nearby. Still, the isolation of the spot miles from the nearest ranger station made my skin prickle. I killed the engine and stepped out, the air cool and heavy with the scent of pine and moss. My boots crunched on gravel as I checked my watch, 6:55 p.m. Tom should be here any minute. I leaned against my truck, scanning the tree line, the shadows shifting as the last light faded. A distant owl hooted its call, echoing through the stillness. Then headlights pierced the darkness, and a beat-up Chevy pickup roared up the road, kicking up dust. Tom leaned out the window, his grin wide. "Ready to bag something, Hayes?" I nodded, grabbing my rifle and climbing into his truck. The cab smelled of leather and cigarette smoke, a cooler of beer wedged between the seats. Tom handed me a can cold against my palm. "Loosen up," he said, cracking his own. "Gonna be a good night." His voice was light, but there was an edge to it, like he was sizing me up. I took a sip, the bitter taste grounding me, as we bounced down the road deeper into the park's outskirts. We parked near a trailhead, the forest, swallowing the last of the daylight. Tom slung a rifle over his shoulder, his movements practiced almost predatory. "My land's just past the boundary," he said, pointing into the trees. "Plenty of game out here. Deer, maybe a boar if we're lucky." I followed my flashlight beam dancing across the underbrush. The forest was alive with small sounds, crickets, rustling leaves, but it felt too quiet, like something was holding its breath. Tom moved ahead, his steps silent despite his size, and I hurried to keep up, my heart thudding louder than I'd like. We stopped at a clearing, the moon just beginning to rise, casting a pale glow over the grass. Tom crouched, pointing to a set of tracks in the dirt. "Deer," he said, his voice low. "Fresh. We're close." I nodded, but my eyes caught something else, a glint of metal half buried in the soil. I knelt, brushing away leaves, to reveal an old hunting knife, its blade rusted, but sharp. "Someone's been out here," I said, holding it up. Tom glanced at it, his expression unreadable. "Folks lose things in these woods all the time," he said, shrugging. "Keep moving." I slipped the knife into my pocket, a weight I couldn't explain tugging at me. The forest seemed to close in the trees, taller, the shadows deeper. Tom's easy chatter had faded, replaced by a focused silence that made my nerves hum. I gripped my rifle tighter, telling myself it was just the strangeness of the place, the stories of lost hikers and old crimes that clung to the Smokies like fog. But as we ventured deeper, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd walked into something I didn't fully understand. The Great Smoky Mountains swallowed us whole, their dense canopy blotting out the stars. My flashlight carved a narrow path through the darkness, illuminating gnarled roots and slick moss that seemed to pulse under the beam. Tom moved like he was part of the forest, his boots barely disturbing the earth while I stumbled over uneven ground, my breath fogging in the chilly air. The rifle felt heavy in my hands, its weight a reminder of how long it had been since I'd done anything like this. I tried to focus on the hunt, on the promise of deer tracks, but the forest's silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional snap of a twig or the distant cry of some unseen creature. Tom stopped abruptly, raising a hand. I froze, my heart lurching as he pointed to a cluster of bushes. There, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I squinted, catching the faint glint of eyes reflecting my flashlight. A deer, maybe, or something else. My finger hovered near the trigger, but Tom shook his head. "Not yet. Let's get closer." His tone was calm, but there was something in his eyes, a hunger that wasn't just about the hunt. I nodded, swallowing the unease that coiled in my chest, and followed him deeper into the thicket. The trail narrowed, forcing us to walk single file. I kept my eyes on Tom's back, his flannel shirt blending into the shadows. He'd been quiet since we left the clearing, his earlier warmth replaced by a focused intensity. I tried to fill the silence, asking about his land, how long he'd been hunting here. "Years," he said curtly, not turning around. "Families had this spot forever, know every inch of it." His words were clipped, like he was guarding something. I let it drop, focusing on the crunch of leaves under my boots, the way the air seemed to thicken the farther we went. We came across a small stream, its water black and glassy under the moonlight. Tom knelt, dipping his fingers in and splashing his face. "Cold as hell," he said, flashing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I crouched beside him, refilling my canteen, the icy water numbing my hands. As I straightened, I noticed something odd, a pile of stones stacked in a deliberate pattern, like a cairn half hidden by ferns. "What's that?" I asked, pointing. Tom glanced over, his expression tightening for a split second before he shrugged. "Kids, probably. Hikers messing around. Come on, we're losing time." I lingered, my gaze fixed on the stones. They didn't look random. They were too precise, too purposeful. I thought of the knife in my pocket, its rusted blade a silent warning. The Smokies had a history missing. Hikers, strange disappearances, tales of things that didn't belong in the light of day. I shook my head, telling myself I was being paranoid. Tom was just a guy, a father with a troubled kid, not some boogeyman from a campfire story. Still, I kept my rifle close as we moved on. The forest grew denser, the trees crowding together like they were trying to keep us in. Tom stopped again this time, pointing to a broken branch, sap still oozing from the wound. "Something big came through here," he said, his voice low and eager. "Boar, maybe?" I nodded, but my eyes caught another oddity, a scrap of fabric snagged on a thorn bush, faded, but unmistakably plaid. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the rough material. It looked like it had been torn off in a hurry. "Tom, you see this?" I held it up, my voice steady, despite the tightening in my chest. He barely glanced at it. "Old shirt. People camp out here, leave their crap behind." His tone was dismissive, but he shifted his weight, his rifle swinging slightly as if he were ready to move. I tucked the fabric into my pocket next to the knife, my mind racing. The signs were piling up, too many small things that didn't add up. I tried to focus on the hunt, but the forest felt alive in a way that wasn't comforting, like it was watching us, waiting. We pushed deeper, the moonlight barely penetrating the canopy now. Tom's pace quickened, his steps, purposeful, almost predatory. I struggled to keep up, my flashlight flickering as the batteries weakened. "Slow down," I called, my voice sharper than I intended. He turned, his face half lit by my beam, and for a moment I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, something not quite human. "Gotta keep moving," he said, his grin returning but strained. "Game's not gonna wait." I nodded, my grip tightening on the rifle, the weight of the night pressing harder against me. The forest seemed to breathe around us, its shadows twisting in ways that made my eyes play tricks. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch sent a jolt through me, my nerves fraying with each step. Tom moved ahead, his silhouette blending into the dark, his rifle slung low, like an extension of his body. I kept my flashlight trained on the ground, watching for roots or rocks, but my attention kept drifting to him. His silence was heavier now, not the quiet of a hunter stalking prey, but something else. Something deliberate, like he was holding back words or intentions I couldn't guess. We reached a small ridge, the ground sloping sharply into a ravine below. Tom crouched, scanning the darkness, his breath visible in the cold air. "We're close," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Smell that blood?" I inhaled, catching a faint metallic tang that made my stomach turn. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I wanted to find whatever had left that scent. My flashlight swept the ravine, catching glints of something wet on the leaves below. "What's down there?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Tom didn't answer right away. He stood, his eyes fixed on the ravine, his jaw tight. "Probably a kill," he said finally. "Coyote, maybe? Or a bear." His words were casual, but his posture was anything but tense, like a spring coiled too tight. I took a step closer to the edge, my beam illuminating a patch of torn earth streaked with dark smears that looked too much like blood. Something glinted in the dirt, a buckle maybe, or a piece of jewelry. I started to point it out, but Tom grabbed my arm, his grip hard enough to bruise. "Don't," he said sharply. "We're not here for that." I pulled free, my heart pounding. "What the hell, Tom? What's going on?" My voice echoed slightly, swallowed by the forest's vastness. He stepped back, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Just stay focused," he said, his tone softer now, almost pleading. "We're hunting all right. Let's keep moving." I wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the weight of the rifle in my hands and the darkness around us kept me quiet. I followed, but the trust I'd felt earlier was crumbling. We descended into the ravine, the air growing colder, damper. The ground was slick, and I nearly slipped, catching myself on a tree. Tom didn't look back, his pace relentless. I noticed more signs now, scratches on tree trunks, too high for a deer or boar, and a faint trail of broken twigs leading deeper into the woods. My flashlight caught another oddity. A child's shoe half buried in mud, its laces frayed. I stopped, my breath catching. "Tom, this isn't right," I said, holding up the shoe. "This doesn't belong here." He turned, his eyes narrowing. "You're jumpy, Hayes. It's just trash. People dump shit in these woods all the time." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, like he was daring me to push further. I dropped the shoe, my fingers trembling. The knife and fabric in my pocket felt heavier, like anchors pulling me toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. I thought of Jacob, his smug warnings, and wondered if I'd misjudged him too. Maybe he'd been trying to tell me something, not just throwing empty threats. We pressed on, the forest growing denser, the air thick with the smell of decay. Tom stopped at a cluster of pines, their needles forming a soft carpet underfoot. He knelt, running his hand over the ground, then held up a finger slick with something dark. "Blood," he said, his voice almost excited. "Fresh. We're on the trail." I nodded, but my eyes were drawn to a shape in the shadows, a pile of bones, small and delicate, scattered like they'd been picked clean. I swallowed hard, my mind racing with images of lost hikers, of stories I dismissed as folklore. "Tom," I said, my voice low, "we need to talk. What are we really doing out here?" He stood, wiping his hand on his jeans, his grin returning, but colder now. "Hunting," he said simply. "What else?" But his eyes didn't match his words. They were too sharp, too focused, like he was watching me as much as the forest. I gripped my rifle, my thumb brushing the safety, and followed him deeper, the weight of the night pressing harder against my chest. The forest seemed to tighten its grip, the trees leaning closer, their branches clawing at the sky. My flashlight flickered its beam, stuttering, as if the darkness itself was draining its power. I shook it, cursing under my breath, and the light steadied, casting a weak glow over the path. Tom was ahead, his silhouette a hulking shape against the faint moonlight. He hadn't spoken in what felt like hours, his focus locked on something I couldn't see. The air was thick with the smell of pine, and something sharper like rust or rot, and every step felt like wading through a dream that was turning sour. We crossed a shallow creek, the water icy against my boots. I noticed more signs now, scratches on rocks, a faint trail of bent grass leading nowhere. My pocket weighed heavy with the knife, the fabric, and now a small tarnished ring I'd found near the creek, its band etched with initials I couldn't read. I didn't show it to Tom. His reactions to the other finds, the knife, the shoe, had been too dismissive, too quick, like he was hiding something. I kept my eyes on him, watching the way he moved, deliberate and silent, like a predator stalking prey. He stopped at a small clearing, the ground littered with pine cones and broken branches. "We'll wait here," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Game's close." I nodded, my throat tight, and crouched beside him, my rifle resting across my knees. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting jagged shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking. I tried to focus on the hunt, but my mind kept drifting to the objects in my pocket, to Jacob's warnings, to the stories of the Smokies hikers. Vanishing bodies never found, whispers of something older, darker lurking in these woods. A soft crunch broke the silence, and I snapped my head toward the sound. Tom's hand shot out, gripping my shoulder. "Quiet," he hissed, his eyes locked on the trees. I followed his gaze, my heart pounding, but saw nothing, just shadows and the faint rustle of leaves. "What is it?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He didn't answer, his fingers tightening until I winced. Then he released me, standing slowly, his rifle raised. "Thought I saw something," he said, his tone flat. False alarm. I didn't believe him. The way his eyes darted, the way his body tensed, it wasn't the posture of a man chasing a deer. I stood, my flashlight sweeping the clearing, catching a glimpse of something pale in the underbrush. I stepped closer, ignoring Tom's sharp intake of breath. It was a bone long and thin, half buried in the dirt. Not animal human. My stomach lurched, and I backed away, my beam shaking. "Tom, what the hell is this?" I demanded, my voice louder than I meant. He turned, his face half lit, his expression unreadable. "Probably old," he said, shrugging. "These woods are full of history, settlers, hikers, accidents." His words were smooth, practiced, but they didn't match the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand hovered near his rifle. I took a step back, my mind racing. The bone, the ring, the shoe, they weren't random. They were pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. "We should head back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This doesn't feel right." Tom's grin returned, but it was wrong. Too wide, too sharp. "Head back. We're just getting started." He stepped closer, his boots crunching on the pine cones, and I felt the air shift like the forest itself was holding its breath. I gripped my rifle, my thumb brushing the safety, but I didn't flip it. Not yet. "Tom, I'm serious," I said. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm not comfortable with this." He tilted his head, studying me like I was a specimen. "You're a curious one, Hayes, always asking questions." His voice was low, almost teasing, but there was a threat beneath it. "You wanted to hunt, didn't you? So let's hunt." He turned, moving deeper into the woods, and I followed, not because I wanted to, but because the alternative, being alone in this forest, was worse. My flashlight flickered again, and for a moment I swore I saw something move in the shadows, something too tall, too thin to be human. We stopped at a gnarled oak, its branches twisted like skeletal fingers. Tom knelt, running his hand over the ground, and pulled up a small bloodied feather. "Owl," he said, tossing it aside. But his eyes didn't leave mine, and I felt the weight of his gaze, like he was testing me, waiting for me to crack. I wanted to ask about the bone, the ring, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I said, "You sure we're on private land? This feels like park territory." Tom laughed, a low, guttural sound. "You worry too much. I told you I know these woods." But his laugh didn't reach his eyes, and I noticed his hand tighten on his rifle, his knuckles white. The forest seemed to close in the air, growing colder, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone, that something was watching, waiting just beyond the light. The forest had turned hostile, its shadows sharp and jagged like teeth waiting to snap shut. My flashlight was dying its beam, a frail flicker that barely reached the trees ahead. Tom's silhouette loomed larger now, his movements too fluid, too silent for a man his size. I kept my distance, my rifle heavy in my hands, my thumb hovering near the safety. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and something fouler, like meat left too long in the sun. Every sound, the crack of a branch, the rustle of leaves, felt like a warning, but Tom pressed on, undeterred, his focus razor sharp. We reached a narrow path, barely visible under the overgrowth. Tom stopped, his head tilting as if listening to something I couldn't hear. "We're close," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel underfoot. I didn't ask what he meant. My throat was too dry, my pulse too loud. I scanned the darkness, my flashlight catching glints of moisture on the leaves, but also something else, a smear of red on a tree trunk too fresh to be old. I stepped closer, my beam trembling, and saw claw marks gouged deep into the bark, higher than any animal could reach. "Tom," I said, my voice cracking, "this isn't deer. What the hell are we chasing?" He turned, his eyes glinting in the moonlight, and for a moment I swore they weren't human. Too wide, too dark, like pools of ink. "You're jumpy," he said, his grin returning, but twisted like he was enjoying my fear. "Just a bear, maybe. Big one. Keep your eyes open." His words were meant to reassure, but they felt like a lie, each syllable heavy with something unspoken. I clutched the rifle tighter, my palms slick with sweat. The objects in my pocket, The knife, the fabric, the ring, the feather burned against my thigh, each one a piece of evidence I couldn't ignore. I thought of Jacob, his smug warnings about his father, and wondered if he'd known something, if he'd been trying to protect me or himself. "Tom," I said again, my voice firmer. "We need to stop. This isn't right. I'm heading back." I turned my flashlight, sweeping the path behind us, but the trail seemed different now. The trees closer, the path narrower, like the forest was shifting to trap us. Tom grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. His grip was iron, his face inches from mine. "You don't get it, do you?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're in it now." No turning back. His breath was hot, sour, and I caught a glimpse of his teeth, too sharp, too many. I yanked free, stumbling back, my rifle raised instinctively. "What the hell are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice shaking but loud. "What's going on, Tom?" He laughed, a sound that echoed wrong, like it came from somewhere deep and hollow. "You wanted to hunt," he said, stepping closer. "So we're hunting. But you're asking too many questions, Hayes. That's dangerous out here." His rifle hung loose in his hand, but his posture screamed threat, every muscle coiled like a predator ready to strike. I took another step back, my flashlight flickering out, completely plunging us into near darkness. The moonlight barely reached us, casting his face in sharp relief, his eyes glinting with something feral. I heard it then, a low growl, not from Tom, but from the trees behind him. My heart stopped, my breath catching as I swung my rifle toward the sound. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Tom didn't move, didn't even blink. "Just the woods," he said. But his grin widened, and I saw it again, that flicker in his eyes, like something else was looking through them. I backed away, my boots sinking into the soft earth, my mind screaming to run, but my body frozen. Another sound closer now, a crunch of leaves, a heavy thud, like something massive moving through the underbrush. I swung my rifle, my hands shaking, but saw nothing, just shadows that seemed to pulse with life. "Tom, we need to go," I said, my voice desperate. He didn't answer, just watched me, his head tilted like he was studying prey. Then he raised his rifle, not at the trees, but at me, the barrel steady. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice cold, final. "Not until we're done." I froze, my blood turning to ice. The forest seemed to close in the air, thick with the weight of something ancient, something wrong. I didn't know what Tom was, or what he wanted, but I knew I'd made a mistake coming here. And I knew deep in my bones that the hunt wasn't for deer, it was for me. The moonlight broke through the canopy, casting a sickly glow over the clearing we'd stumbled into. My flashlight was dead, its batteries drained, leaving me with only the pale light of the moon to see by. Tom stood across from me, his rifle still raised, his eyes locked on mine. The growl from the trees had faded, but the air was heavy, charged with a tension that made my skin crawl. I kept my rifle up, my finger off the trigger, but ready, my heart hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. The forest was silent now, unnaturally, so like every creature had fled or been silenced. Tom put the gun down. I said, my voice steady, despite the fear clawing at my chest. "Whatever this is, we can talk it out." He didn't move, his grin fixed, his teeth catching the moonlight in a way that made them look wrong, too long, too pointed. "Talk," he said, his voice low, almost a snarl. "You're not here to talk, Hayes. You're here to learn." His words sent a chill through me, and I took a step back, my boots sinking into the muddy ground. The clearing was small, ringed by twisted trees that seemed to lean inward, their branches like skeletal hands. In the center, a pile of rocks caught my eye, stacked like the cairn I'd seen earlier, but larger, more deliberate. Something glinted among them, a watch, its face cracked but still ticking. I tore my eyes away, focusing on Tom. "Learn what?" I asked, my voice sharp. "What the hell is going on? Who are you?" My mind flashed to Jacob, to his warnings, to the way he'd spoken of his father with a mix of fear and defiance. Had he known something? Had he tried to warn me? Tom lowered his rifle slightly, but his eyes never left mine. "You're a smart guy, Hayes," he said, his tone mocking. "Figure it out. You think I'm Jacob's dad? You think this is just a hunt?" He laughed, a sound that grated against my nerves, echoing through the clearing. "You're in the Smokies now. Things aren't what they seem." He stepped forward, and I raised my rifle higher, my hands trembling. "Stay back," I warned, my voice cracking. "I'm not playing your game." His grin faded, replaced by a look of cold calculation. "Game," he said softly. "This ain't no game." He took another step, and I heard it again, the growl low and guttural coming from the trees behind me. I spun my rifle swinging, but saw nothing, just shadows that seemed to writhe in the moonlight. When I turned back, Tom was closer, too close, his rifle at his side, but his posture screaming danger. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But you did, and now you're part of it." I backed away, my eyes darting between him and the trees. The growl came again, closer, and I caught a glimpse of movement. Something large, too fast to track. My heart seized, my breath shallow. Part of what I demanded, my voice rising. "What are you doing out here, Tom? What's with the bones, the blood, the ring?" I pulled the ring from my pocket, holding it up, its etched initials glinting in the moonlight. His eyes flicked to it, and for a moment, his mask slipped. Anger, maybe fear, flashed across his face. "You don't know what you're messing with," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Put that down and walk away. Last chance." But I couldn't walk away, not now. The pieces were falling into place, the objects, the signs, the way Tom's demeanor shifted, like a predator toying with its prey. I thought of the stories, the disappearances, the whispers of something unnatural in these woods. "You're not Tom Carter," I said, my voice steady despite the fear. "Who are you?" He froze, his eyes narrowing, and then he laughed, a cold, hollow sound that made my blood run cold. "Smart," he said, stepping closer, "but not smart enough." The growl erupted again, so close it vibrated through my chest, and I saw it, a shape in the trees, tall and gaunt, its eyes glowing like embers. Tom didn't flinch, didn't turn, just kept watching me, his grin returning. "You wanted to hunt," he said. "So let's hunt." I didn't wait. I turned and ran, my boots pounding the earth, my rifle bouncing against my shoulder. The forest blurred around me, branches snagging at my jacket, my breath ragged. Behind me I heard Tom's laughter, mingled with the growl, growing louder, closer. The moonlight flickered through the trees, and I realized with a sickening lurch that I wasn't just running from Tom, I was running from something else, something that didn't belong in this world. The forest was a maze of shadows, each tree a barrier, each root a trap waiting to trip me. My lungs burned as I ran, my boots slipping on the damp earth, my rifle a dead weight in my hands. The moonlight barely reached the ground, casting everything in a ghostly half-light that made every shape look like a threat. Behind me the growl was constant, now a low, rumbling menace that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Tom's laughter had faded, but I could feel him, or whatever he was, close, his presence a weight on my back, like eyes boring into me. I crashed through a thicket, thorns tearing at my sleeves, and stumbled into another clearing. My chest heaved, my breath coming in sharp gasps as I spun, rifle raised, searching the darkness. The growl stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that was worse somehow than the noise. I backed against a tree, its bark rough against my spine, and tried to steady my shaking hands. My flashlight was gone, lost somewhere in the chaos, and my rifle felt useless against whatever was out there. I thought of the ring, the knife, the bone clues to a truth I didn't want to face. Tom wasn't human. He couldn't be. A twig snapped to my left, and I swung my rifle, my finger twitching on the trigger. Nothing. just shadows shifting like they were alive. I forced myself to breathe, to think. I needed to find the trail, the road, my truck, anything that would get me out of this nightmare. I took a step, then another, my eyes scanning the trees. That's when I saw it, a shape tall and thin standing just beyond the clearing's edge. Its eyes glowed red and unblinking, and its limbs were wrong, too long, bent in ways that defied nature. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs, my rifle useless in my trembling hands. "Tom," I shouted, my voice raw. "If that's you, stop this. Just stop." No answer, just the faint rustle of leaves as the shape moved, circling the clearing, staying just out of the moonlight. I backed away, my boots sinking into the soft earth, and tripped over something hard. I looked down, a skull, human, its empty socket staring up at me. My stomach lurched, and I scrambled back, my rifle slipping from my grasp. I grabbed it, my hands slick with sweat, and stood, my eyes darting between the skull and the shape in the trees. Another sound, this time behind me, a low, guttural chuckle. I spun, and there was Tom standing at the edge of the clearing, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his grin wide and unnatural. "You're fast," he said, his voice too calm, too wrong, but not fast enough. He stepped into the moonlight, and I saw it. His face was changing, the skin stretching, his eyes growing darker, his teeth sharpening. "Who are you?" I screamed, my voice breaking. "What do you want?" He tilted his head, the movement jerky like a puppet on strings. "I'm what lives here," he said, his voice a low growl. "And you're mine." The shape in the trees moved closer, its form clearer now. A twisted mockery of a man, its limbs elongated, its skin gray and mottled. I raised my rifle, my hands shaking, and fired. The shot echoed the bullet, tearing through the trees. But the shape was gone, and Tom just laughed, the sound ripping through me like a blade. I ran again, my legs burning, my mind a blur of panic and disbelief. The forest seemed to fight me, branches snagging my clothes, roots rising to trip me. I heard the growl again, closer, and felt a hot breath on my neck like something was inches away. I swung my rifle blindly, hitting nothing but air, and kept running, the clearing fading behind me. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to move, had to survive. The moonlight flickered, and I saw it again, the shape darting between trees, its eyes locked on me. I stumbled into another clearing, smaller, the ground slick with something dark. I fell to my knees, my hands sinking into the wet earth, and realized it was blood, warm and fresh. I gagged, scrambling back, and saw them, bodies, or what was left of them, scattered across the clearing. Limbs torn apart, torsos mangled, faces unrecognizable. And there, against a tree, was Jacob, his eyes wide and lifeless, his chest ripped open. I screamed, my voice lost in the forest silence, and heard Tom's laugh again, closer now, right behind me. The clearing was a slaughterhouse, the air thick with the coppery stench of blood and decay. Jacob's body slumped against the tree, his face frozen in a silent scream, his chest a gaping wound that glistened in the moonlight. My knees buckled, the rifle slipping from my hands as I stared, my mind refusing to process the horror before me. The forest was silent, but it wasn't empty. I could feel it, the weight of eyes watching, waiting. Tom's laugh echoed again, closer, and I spun, my heart a drumbeat in my chest. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his form shifting, growing, the moonlight revealing something monstrous beneath his skin. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice no longer human. A guttural snarl that seemed to come from the earth itself. His face twisted, the skin splitting, revealing muscle and bone that pulsed and grew. His eyes were black voids, his teeth elongating into jagged points, his body stretching until his clothes tore, falling away like shed skin. The thing that had been Tom was gone, replaced by a creature tall, gaunt, its limbs bent at unnatural angles, its skin gray and slick, like something dredged from a nightmare. It stepped forward, its claws scraping the earth, and I scrambled back, my hands sinking into the blood-soaked ground. I grabbed my rifle, my fingers slick, and fired blindly, the shot deafening in the silence. The creature didn't flinch. Its eyes locked on me, its grin a mockery of Tom's. I fired again, the bullet tearing through its shoulder, but it only laughed, a sound that clawed at my sanity. "You can't kill what's already here," it said, its voice a chorus of whispers overlapping wrong. I stumbled to my feet, my legs screaming with pain I hadn't noticed, and ran the forest, blurring around me. Branches tore at my face, my lungs burned, but I kept moving, driven by a primal need to survive. The creature's growl followed, a constant shadow at my back, its footsteps heavy, deliberate. I saw the trailhead in the distance, the faint outline of the park sign, and pushed harder, my vision swimming. My truck was there, a beacon of hope, but as I reached it, I heard the growl again right behind me. I turned, raising my rifle, but the creature was faster, its claw slashing across my chest, sending me sprawling into the dirt. Pain exploded through me, hot and blinding, as I crawled toward the truck, my hands slipping in my own blood. The creature loomed over me, its eyes glowing, its form shifting between Tom and something else, something ancient. "You're part of it now," it said, its voice a hiss. I fumbled for the rifle, my fingers closing around the trigger, and fired one last time, the bullet hitting its chest. It staggered but didn't fall, its laughter filling the night as I dragged myself into the truck, slamming the door. I turned the key, the engine roaring to life, and floored the gas, the tires spinning on the gravel. The creature stood in the road, unmoving, its eyes burning into mine as I sped away, the forest shrinking in my rearview mirror. I didn't stop until I hit the highway, my hands shaking my chest, bleeding my mind, a chaos of fear and disbelief. Jacob was dead. Tom was something else, and I'd walked right into their trap. I don't know what lives in the Great Smoky Mountains, what hunts in those woods under the guise of men. I only know I survived barely, and that the forest will never let me forget. As I drove, the ring in my pocket felt heavier, a reminder of the truth I'd uncovered too late. I wished I'd listened to Jacob, wished I'd stayed home, wished I'd been more careful. But wishes don't change what's done. Thank you for joining me on this harrowing journey through the Hollow Hunt. I hope it left you chilled and curious about the shadows that linger in the places we think we know. Stay safe and maybe think twice before venturing into the dark.